Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Noah Freeman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and rejoining us after, it's been a while. It's been a minute. Back on the show is one Noah Freeman. Hey, Noah, what's going on, man? How you been?
Been good. It's like you said, it's been a while. We've just took the last 20, 30 minutes trying to figure out my audio equipment because apparently it's been so long. So if you hear any spotty video or audio or any of it right now, it is not working like normal. So apologies in advance because I'm sure we'll have to apologize at some point, but I'm doing good.
Yeah, I guess as good as we can be. Yeah, with a lot of technical challenges, and I'd like to apologize to anybody in advance. Of course, none of this would be any better if Brian were here anyways, even with his 1,000 computers and Steelers helmets littered about his studio there. So I know I was teasing you just a few seconds ago too as we were doing this. I got to bring it up, man. You've got like the 5,000 piece. You don't have to show it, but it's somewhere in the background. He's trying to adjust his camera. I'm like, is that a Lego Harry Potter Hogwarts castle sitting back there? Get it?
It is.
Oh, I was gonna get it a little bit closer on there along with the wedding photo, but yeah, there we go.
All the way back in that pixelated image. Yeah.
It's just like, as a comedy of errors, it's like, hey, whoa, that's pretty cool. You know, my I don't mean this to be disrespectful in any way. I'm still a big Lego fan. I'm a big kid at heart, but my 8-year-old daughter would love that.
Oh yeah, it was actually a lot of fun as an adult to do. Put that together as one of those like, I now have adult money to spend on like adult things.
Yeah. Just wait, man. If you have kids in your future, that goes away real quick.
Oh yeah,
it's just as fun. You buy it for them, but it's really for you. That's how some of that works.
Oh look, we're going to the zoo, but it's like, we're buying this Lego. It'll be really fun to put together.
And then I'm the one that ends up doing like half of the work, but she's getting better. As she gets older, she's getting a lot better with it. So can't complain about that. We have, we have oodles of sets. There's like, oh man, I wish I could flip the camera around and you could see. I got one up actually right over yonder here. It's one of those Baby Yodas, the Grogu, and it's like the yay big. I don't know if that's really like to size, like scale with the Mandalorian, but the Baby Yoda, and that was actually quite challenging even for an adult to put together. But
yeah,
so let's explain like why you're here, because I need some reinforcements when it comes to more quarterback talk. I got Flash, I got Zach. He's totally against me. He's Kenny Pickett almost all the way, which is okay. That's fine. Brian, on the other hand, he's an odd duck. He says that Kenny Pickett was going to be the next Mark Malone. So if anybody hasn't been, by the way, thank you, all of our viewers over on YouTube, over 5,000 subscribers now. We truly appreciate it. Quite humbling, to say the least, and the numbers have been phenomenal so far as we continue to just talk about quarterbacks over and over and over, and everybody has an opinion. So Noah's like, hey, I could probably add to this and defend Mason Rudolph a little bit. So I'm just going to throw you under the bus immediately. But we're going to talk about everything here because we just had OTAs, we just had mini camps, and as I have it labeled here, the Steelers quarterback competition isn't as cut and dry as some may think. And I got to start that off by just saying, man, Andrew Filipponi just came on Twitter, as he does from time to time, and he always gives us some good bulletin board material here. So one of the things he had just put up, I wish I had it here. I'm just going to read it and put it up on the screen maybe sometime later. But I'm excited to watch the Steelers. Oh no, this was a different one. I'm excited to watch the Steelers sweep the Browns this season, going 2-0 against Jacoby Brissett and the rocket scientist Josh Dobbs. That wasn't the one I wanted, though. What was the other one I rat-holed here? I think I got it somewhere. Can't find it. But he was talking about maybe the best-case scenario, I think, for the Steelers is if Mitch Trubisky is competent. He used the word competent, and they get 9-7, and they get into the playoffs, and then lose in the playoffs. And I'm just kind of like, where's the take at that at any point with the Steelers, this quarterback search? It's not quite American Idol here. We don't get a vote.
Yeah.
But it's as soon as Mitchell Trubisky was signed, it was, oh, there he is, and Mason Rudolph's immediately the backup, and he's done. He's out of this. And then they went and they drafted Kenny Pickett. Now all of a sudden there's talk of, well, Mitch Trubisky, hold on a second. He's just maybe could be competent. He's going to be a bridge quarterback. Like, that just, I don't know. Does it drive you as crazy seeing some of these comments about, like, it's like most people are like selling one or the other guy down the river, really not even giving all three of them a chance, even though we both know the reason we're talking today is because no one's given Mason a chance at all. But it seems like no matter which corner you turn, it's not a settled situation. But like, it's just like, why can't everyone just give everyone a benefit of the doubt and we kind of shake this out at training camp?
Yeah, I agree. I'll start off by saying I think I will echo a lot of what you have said overall throughout the last few months of podcasting, and kind of summarize it a little bit. And first lead off with that I think Mitchell Trubisky will probably be the day one starting quarterback. He's probably going to go through a lot of those major reps. But like you said, like the title of this podcast, the Steelers competition isn't as cut and dry as some may think. And I'm going to go back to, again, 2 points that you mentioned with, we know a lot about Mitchell Trubisky. We have seen a lot of tape on him, whether it's in a different system or not. We don't know a lot about Mason Rudolph. We haven't seen a full, maybe like even partial career necessarily from Mason Rudolph. And we'll go back to that 2019 season where, what was the Steelers record before he kind of took over? If you kind of take out that game that Ben got injured where they lost.
They got absolutely torched by the New England Patriots to start that year. If you recall, it was just the Chris Boswell field goal. It was like a bajillion to 3, 33 to 3 to be exact. And so Mason took over halftime of that Seattle Seahawks game. It was kind of like, now a quarterback, number 2, Mason Rudolph. And like the whole crowd's like, whoa, what's going on? Like Twitter was blowing up, phone was blowing up. I actually, that was one of the rare games where I went. Usually I'm there with one of my cousins or a buddy or friend or somebody. I was there solo that time for that home opener at Heinz Field. Once again, another week 2 home opener, just like there's going to be this season. But yeah, it took over at halftime. Apparently, we all thought, well, wait, what happened with Ben? You know what I mean? And you're thinking Ben's a gladiator, he's a warrior. And then all of a sudden, like Monday or Tuesday, it's like, well, he's done for the season. All indications are he's done for the season. So they were already in the hole. And that was a game where Terrell Edmonds got called for a really crap pass interference call. I'll never forget, like I was like second and long, like second 25 or third and 25 or something ridiculous at Russell Wilson. And he heaved like one of those old Joe Flacco balls down the field. And I didn't think Edmonds really got interfered whatsoever. He did his job, and they threw the flag on that. And that's what ended up leading to them losing that game. You go into week 3, they trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. All of a sudden that looks like a genius maneuver. James Conner fumbles, I think, within the Steelers' own 20, and that ended up giving San Francisco the go-ahead points in that game. And all of a sudden, they're in the basement. They're 0-3 after 3 weeks, and these were close games. Not the New England one, obviously. Everyone can remember New England for Dante Moncrief can't catch the ball. And then it's like, well, this guy was still around the next few weeks with Mason Rudolph. In fact, one of Mason Rudolph's first passes or his first pick was right off the hands. Like, it was literally in his hands right here. He had like almost like the breadbasket, and he pops the ball straight up in the air. Then you get what was it? It was a primetime game, Monday Night Football against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 4, and the Steelers climb out of that because the Bengals were extremely bad that season. That's what led them to the Joe Burrow sweepstakes. They end up being 1-3. Mason Rudolph gets hurt from the Earl Thomas hit in Week 5, a 23-26 overtime loss after a Juju fumble punched out by Marlon Humphrey. And then the Steelers get back on track with not 1 but 2 Devin Bush forced turnovers. You remember at the old, or was it the new Los Angeles Chargers? I'm trying to remember if that was the last year.
It was
first
year. Los Angeles. Yeah, first year.
Yeah, they were in the soccer stadium and whatnot. But Last year, Phillip Rivers there, and they almost pushed the comeback, but that was a Duck Hodges game before the bye week. So they were 2-4 before the bye. Rip off 3 wins as Mason Rudolph comes back after the bye. Miami Dolphins 27-14, Colts 26-24, and Rams 17-12. They lose a Thursday night game. That was a terrible 4-interception game against the Cleveland Browns, which I will bring up constantly for James Conner, Deontay Johnson, all getting hurt within that game. Juju and Connor, of course, were already dinged and trying to get on the field to play on a short week, and that just led to them being kind of banged up and hurt. Mason gets benched during a 16-10 loss at the Cincinnati Bengals. There's a 20-13 win for Duck Hodges against Cleveland Browns at home. Turnaround against the Arizona Cardinals. If you remember this game, this was Kyler Murray turning the ball over, 3-4 times. And even though Duck was the starter, it was only a 23-17 win out in the desert. And then the last 3 games of that season, the Steelers, they got the game against the Buffalo Bills moved to a Sunday night game. Both of these teams were looking to be in playoff contention. Remember, the Bills were just on the rise. They weren't thought of as a contender at the time. And Mike Tomlin was in this head coach of the year conversation for even having this Steelers team anywhere near sniffing the playoffs. Duck Hodges throws 3 picks in this game, I believe. I'm pulling it up right now. Let's see here. 17-10 loss. And Hodges had, the one touchdown to 4 interceptions, sacked 4 times, 43.9 quarterback rating in that loss. He had a number of opportunities to maybe pull it out. The week before, let me see, Kyler Murray sacked 5 times, 3 picks in that game with a fumble. Hodges only 16-19, 152 yards and 1 touchdown, sacked 3 times, 117.5 rating in that game, but he didn't even throw 20 passes. So it's funny how those things shake out. But there you go. There's your Mason Rudolph starting season. If you want to know, I could rattle off a little more here because I came prepared. Let's see. I came partially prepared, I should say. Mason Rudolph for 2019 was, 176 of 283 yards, 62.2% completed, 1,765 yards, 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. That had him at an 82 quarterback rating. He only took 15. People are quick to throw out that, Mason, he had a better offensive line back then than maybe what he will have now. And I don't know. I guess to some degree, you still have Matt Filer out there, or aging, dinged up Ramon Foster, or Alejandro Villanueva. So it's kind of hard for me to say one way or another here, Noah. But I've got some numbers from Ben Roethlisberger. I have Mason's career, by the way, with the 10 starts, 384 attempts, 61.5 completed, 2366 yards, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. We can put that up. Ben Roethlisberger's first year, fewer attempts at 295, 66.4 completed, 26-24 yardage, 17-11 interceptions, took 30 sacks. You go to in his second year, still fewer attempts, about the same amount of yardage almost, 23-85, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Now remember, magic number here with Mason Rudolph. This was 16-11. 16 touchdowns to 11 interceptions and sacks. So when you put it up against Ben Roethlisberger's first 3 seasons individually, you got 17, 11, and 30, 17, 9, and 23, 18, 23, and 46 sacks. And let me tell you this. If Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett goes out there and they go, all right, 469 attempts, 3,500 yards, but they throw 18 touchdowns, to 23 interceptions, get sacked a whopping 46 times. I don't think there's anybody in Steelers Nation that's going to say that Mitchell Trubisky or Kenny Pickett's the future. But if Mason Rudolph has these similar numbers with fewer sacks, as way shown in his career, then he's no good. He's done. Why even give him a chance?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that 2019 season with starting out, basically, if you can take away those first 2 games, because he more or less didn't play. And I don't know if you can really count those games against him, because obviously he didn't play against New England, only played in half of Seattle. So if you take away just 2 losses in general, when you've got Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, you're at an 8-6 record. And you already go back to the original tweet that you talked about with kind of more or less summing that tweet up by saying just mediocrity is where we can have it. Like the best case scenario is having mediocrity from Mitchell Trubisky. It's like you've already seen at the very minimum with a completely different team that I'll go in just a second. You've seen mediocrity from Mason Rudolph already. So like, I'm not necessarily saying that that's going to be the floor, but we've already seen mediocrity from him. And there's a better chance than not that that could be the floor for this team with the way he has performed in just a single season. And that season, he was in and out from being injured or benched or starting out the year. And like we've talked about, and like what you've talked about recently a lot, is he's potentially going to have a lot more stable situation of being, hey, I could be a guy that could go in and play every single game. Maybe not every minute, but every single game. And you've got a completely different wide receiver core and offensive coordinator and running back and tight end than you have since that last season that he even did in mediocrity. And I would say almost in all of those facets, the offensive coordinator, I guess, is still TBD. But in all of those facets, I think we can still already confidently say that they're better than what they were. You mentioned the offensive line, but it's comparable. In 2019, the more or less the Steelers' high receiving numbers for most of those games came down to was it 5 from Juju Smith-Schuster, a couple from James Conner, 5 from James Washington, 1 from Jalen Samuels, 3 from Deontay Johnson. And what's the commonality between almost every single one of them? They're not on the team anymore. There's only one of those receivers that is on the team for those game high receptions. And I think even with as much as we love Juju Smith-Schuster, we don't necessarily think he would have been that number one wide receiver at that point without another supporting cast. And without reiterating or rehashing all of the wide receiver room talk, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's a much better situation. Pat Freiermuth, much better situation, especially in the receiving core, if we talk about that aspect of quarterbacking, because it's obviously receiving the ball from that quarterback. And then I think far and away, you can talk about Najee Harris being a much better running back than James Conner, where you've got these high rushing yards of like 21 yards, 33 yards, 43 yards, 42 yards, 55 yards. Benny Snell getting a 75-yarder, James Conner getting into 175. But then we go into like Jalen Samuels, 29, 26 was the high of the entire game, which is just wow that we forget that aspect of the entire thing, where that's the reason why they had to throw so much too. And they had that weird dink and dunk because the running game just did not exist. And that really handcuffs you as a quarterback. So you get better running game, your quarterbacking game is already going to go better because you don't have to rely on it all the time. Obviously, you get better receivers and a humongous core of receivers that can do something. Your quarterbacking is going to get better. You got a tight end that can block and go out and catch at the same time. There's no question that the offense is the overall parts, because of course you could talk about if Ben Roethlisberger was there, maybe the offense could have been better. But those other extenuating parts, receiver, tight end, running back, are better than they were in 2019, which is when he still had a quote unquote mediocre 8-6. More or less 8-6 season with him and Duck Hodges, a guy that was supposed to be cut in that entire season. So I don't know what else I can say.
No, you're hitting a lot of the points that I've made in the past as well. And that's number one, you have Randy Fichtner and no quarterbacks coach whatsoever for either of. You got to understand that Mason Rudolph comes off of a rookie season in which he's quarterback 3. They're never allowing him to be even the backup. Josh Dobbs is in contention because Mason was drafted. He's in contention with Landry Jones and wins that backup job. He led 6 scoring drives in the preseason. He looked fantastic. You know, we were all very high on Josh Dobbs at that point. And he got into a game and kind of had a little bit of jitters. I don't know. He had an ice cold call there with the against the Raiders. This was the X-ray machine game, if you remember that. And this was towards the decline. And a lot of people are forgetting too that in 2019, they dump a lot on Rudolph. Duck Hodges had a really cool nickname, but I see people say all the time, "Oh, bring back Duck," and it's like, nothing against Duck, but he was an FCS guy, undrafted. Yeah, can't phenom, but you're doing it against comparable players. You're not doing this against players that are making multi-millions. You're doing it against guys who are, not even pulling $1 million in most cases. They're street free agents, undrafted guys that are playing in some of these preseasons. That's who who he's playing against or with in some of these games. And you have some of that rapport that ends up working. But he still didn't put up anything that was very tremendous numbers at all overall. And this isn't a dump on Duck. This is just if the Steelers didn't have if they had absolutely zero faith in Mason Rudolph in that situation, they wouldn't have brought him back. Don't forget, rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins, but they had Dwayne Haskins completely under control. Exclusive rights free agent. They could have rolled with him, said they're going to sign a guy no matter what, and then maybe draft someone. And maybe they felt they weren't going to sign someone or they weren't going to draft someone, and you have him as insurance. But I've gotten in some like really ridiculous arguments over whether or not he's going to be traded or he's going to be cut. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Duck Hodges, 5 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. He throws for 700 fewer yards on 120 fewer attempts and gets sacked the same amount of times. He wasn't any more of a mobile quarterback whatsoever. And I understand people are saying mobility, this and that. Everybody cherry picks what words they want to pick, and then they say, well, they just have to say that. They're not going to say anything bad about Mason Rudolph. Well, they kind of aren't going to say anything bad about any of the other guys either. That's just the way this entire thing works. So value, trade value, or whatever. If you're saying that Mason Rudolph has any value, any kind of trade value, and you think you could get rid of him to another team, why would another team want to necessarily take him? That's my main question. And I'm not saying this because good, bad, or indifferent. I'm saying this because he's no longer subject to waivers. He had already gone through and got a second contract. So that means if the teams could just sit there and wait until he's released and then sign him as a free agent. If some team doesn't want to fight over that, all they're requiring is a 1-year deal. It's not a whole lot of money. And I've gotten to this online with some folks, and it was like, okay, his contract isn't that much. People are thinking, oh, well, $5 or $6 million. No, he's making like $4 million, and he's making like a few $100,000 on the books more than Mitchell Trubisky is. Mitchell Trubisky is just as much at risk to be released if he doesn't perform, especially after this season for next year and whatever cap hit. If they find out Kenny Pickett's the dude, Mitch is gone. That's just the way it is. And that would be the same thing with Rudolph. They could hold on to Rudolph for another year, but you look back to 2019 and you're saying, you want Chris Oladokun in there? You're an injury or two away from, having yet another FCS guy that played at the same school for a year as Duck Hodges, by the way. Okay, he can run around a little bit. Maybe he creates, but we saw the Ravens do this with Tyler Huntley. It didn't work out for them either. They had a slew of injuries. I equate their season much to the same as what the Steelers had to deal with in 2019. But the biggest thing that's left out of this, Noah, Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell are both gone in 2019. You think that even if Ben were in there, 33-3 against the New England Patriots, is 2019, how much of a difference is 2019 with Ben in there? It might not be a whole lot different because it's James Conner fumbles, it's Juju Smith-Schuster fumbles, and it's a lot of the same parallels as we've seen. And that's why I'm not trying to come out and say that Mason Rudolph is going to be the second coming, that he walks on water, that he's infallible, that he's going to be absolutely like just an amazing guy at quarterback, that he's going to be the franchise. But yet we still don't know for sure that he's not. It's just one of those things you have to give him a try. It's the same benefit of the doubt you're giving Mitchell Trubisky. And there's people, there are people out there that are already all over Kenny Pickett, small hands and whatnot. And they're saying, well, Kenny Pickett, he's not going to be any good either. Look, he's this and that with Pitt. Did this for 1 year, didn't do that for the other year. And it's just a whole bunch of nonsense. At this time, it's like, I think the guy you know the most about is Mitchell Trubisky for sure. To say that you know everything about Mason Rudolph is just being disingenuous.
Like you just talked about with Ben Roethlisberger and Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, and even though they were out of the locker room and they weren't both of them weren't on campus per se, the entire time, yes, the off the field issues might have been gone, but the on the field production that they had given for forever was something humongous. And I think this is all hindsight because we're of course wanting to see like the the Steelers do really well each year. We see all the progress they make. We see, all right, we lost this piece, but how can we replace it? And I think we were a little naive going into that season, even if Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback for the entire season, that we were probably going to take a big step back. Because even going back and talking about all those receivers and the high marks for those receivers that season, even if Ben was doing it, I actually have a lot of doubt in that maybe they'd be the same receptions and they'd be a little higher, but it wouldn't have been the best case in the world. So this is also Mason and then Duck Hodges trying to make something out of basically nothing with a team that was taking a bunch of steps back. The defense has always been good. However, this was like the first year that TJ Watt was starting to emerge. He wasn't necessarily the consensus defensive MVP. That was the first season that he should have been, but he just didn't have that whereabout and that knowledge. And this is still where you've got like Cam and Tuitt kind of going back and forth with injuries. It felt like one year, like one was injured, the next year the other was injured. And we had some questions and just a bunch of other places. And the defense probably could be comparable this time. But yeah, like you said, it was just a much different situation. And I don't think we can write off anything that we've seen from him. Like you said, disingenuous is a pretty good word to where we just haven't seen it yet. We haven't given him a full chance. And I don't disagree with Brian or Zach saying that Mason Rudolph, we're not advocating for him to be the franchise quarterback. We're not saying that he will. We're not even saying that he's going to be the quarterback for this season. I think we just shouldn't be able to write him off. And why would you also write off the only quarterback, only veteran quarterback in that room? This guy is going to give so much knowledge, even if Mitchell Trubisky and then Kenny Pickett like soar far and above him in his playing, which would be great news for the Steelers, by the way, because again, we're talking about how Mason is maybe not as bad as some people think they are, but even if he's far and above better, like Mason Rudolph, the amount of knowledge in like, hey, this is where like this is the procedures that we do. This is what we like to do. And like this is what the receivers have liked to get reps in and warm up and all of this extra stuff. Like, when was the last time you heard of a quarterback room, all three plus quarterbacks completely change? It doesn't happen quite that often. So having Mason in there, if anything, if you're such a pessimist for his play on the field, at least you could say his off the field stuff, everything he's going to do is going to be really crucial to trying to get Mitch up to speed with everything with the playbook, get Kenny up to speed, get Chris up to speed, whoever you want to put in there. He's the guy that knows the playbook the best. He knows the organization the best. And he's just going to be a huge asset for those, even if we're trying to, quote unquote, train those next quarterbacks to become the franchise.
Yeah, that kind of drives me a little crazy too. Just so many people just believe because a second quarterback was drafted, that means somebody's immediately off the roster, and it's got to be Mason just because he's been there, because the other two guys were brand spanking new. And
shiny new toy.
Yeah, well, it's always the shiny new toy. And speaking of, I think I've pulled up another good one from Andrew Filipponi. So here we go. All signs point to Trubisky starting week 1. Well, I mean, we're not necessarily disagreeing with that, right? No. You had already kind of said that earlier. So, then he's a stopgap, which I hate. Bridge quarterback stopgap. You're just admitting to that somebody doesn't have the talent to carry your team, which this is kind of what he's trying to say. He's advocating big time for Kenny Pickett here. Biding time for Pickett. Steelers don't think Trubisky can be the guy. If they did, they sign him for more money and they don't draft a quarterback in the first round. It would be a temp position for Mitchell. You buy Trubisky. And this is kind of where I am even with the Mason Rudolph thing. You had already kind of alluded to, like, people are making up all these stories now about whether Ben Roethlisberger had mentored him, or if he's bitter about Ben, or whether he should be mentoring anyone else because God forbid he doesn't have like any experience. But that's why they had him sit for a year. He's sitting behind Ben Roethlisberger. Everybody wanted that next quarterback. They wanted that Aaron Rodgers to Brett Favre type of deal. And at what cost? Yeah, what cost was that to the Steelers, too, with how sharp or not sharp Ben Roethlisberger was pre and post injury, losing some of the players they had lost? Everybody had thought, I find it very interesting that everybody still thinks or thought at the time that Deontay Johnson was a rising star, or James Washington had one good season or was misused, but those all happened under Mason Rudolph's watch. You know what I mean? That was Deontay's rookie season. So you throw a second-year quarterback who had just won the backup spot in that particular situation. And they thought that Duck could be good enough to at least be the quarterback 3. So they get something for Josh Dobbs. And that's why people think you could get something for Mason Rudolph. But Josh Dobbs was still under a rookie contract, a little bit different pay scale, different sort of situations there. I understand the Steelers would save $3 million if they release Mason Rudolph. What kind of player are they signing for only $3 million that's going to be worth more than an experienced backup quarterback who's been around this team for several years? I don't think that value, even if he ends up being quarterback 3, let's say Kenny ascends all the way to starter, which I don't see happening. Let's say, I see the way I see it is that either Mason or Mitchell are the starters and the other one's the backup. And that money doesn't mean a whole hill of beans there. They're both in the same category. They're both making basically backup quarterback type money. So
even less for a lot of backup quarterbacks. And they are one of the better, and they're some of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL too. So like they are a complete bargain at backup, if not definitely starter too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I'm gonna see if I can pull this up on my screen here for you, Noah. I had it from Over the Cap, one of my favorite places to go. If you're not familiar, this is like these guys basically write the book on salary cap type stuff. And if I could pull it in for some of our viewers out there, for the listeners, I'll try and make it as easy to digest here as possible. But pulling this up on the screen and we get down, oh yeah, Deshaun Watson, there's a good contract. But I pulled it up for just 2022 salaries, because you got things like average per year, you've got whatever's on the books in the future. So I understand that Trubisky's making more maybe next year, and he does have more. He has a little bit of a cap hit for next season also too. Let me always pop-ups. But you can see it here. His base salary is only $1 million. His cap number's 3.6. If they cut him next year, they'll only be on the hook for a dead cap of 2.6. They'll save $8 million. So if they find out either of the other guys are worth a hullabaloo, one of my favorite words to use recently, then they save money in this situation. They save the big money, like Menards. I don't know. You got Menards out your way, hardware store. They have like this catchy tune. Well, it's not really catchy. It gets annoying. They play it in the store all the time. But anyways, we got some rookies that are on the list. We get down. Let's see. Teddy Bridgewater is at 6.5. Jacoby Brissett is actually making more, 4.6. Mariota, 4.2. Mason's here at 4. Jameis Winston's at 4. Trubisky at 3.6. Taylor Heineke, 3.6. Some of the other rookies, let's see. Case Keenum, 3.5. Geno Smith, 3.5. Flacco, 3.4. So you're in that kind of that category. And I don't even know where you go with Tyrod Taylor being on like his 7th team, or what did Nick Foles actually sign for here? Not a whole lot of money either. But you know at this point that they're not going to have an opportunity to start, where a few of these other players I just mentioned are kind of in flux there, either direction as to whether or not they could be the starter. I still think you want as many hands on deck when you're not sold on the quarterback situation. The reason we're having this conversation is because we're not sold on any of them. We don't know that Kenny Pickett's going to come in and be the starter right now. We didn't know. Okay, he's maybe the most pro-ready guy of the group that was drafted. But you could see just in the waning interest of the quarterbacks that were selected in this year's NFL draft, there wasn't a whole lot of interest in taking anybody. So, yeah, the Steelers, I think, get a deal because they don't have to move around and make trades or lose any capital to get a guy that could perhaps be a franchise quarterback. But that could also allude to that he's not ready and he has to sit a year. So now you have these other two guys duking it out for these kind of minimal veteran contracts. I mean, did Mitchell Trubisky not have a better deal somewhere on the board? Was he given like this golden promise that he was going to be the de facto starter in Pittsburgh? I mean, obviously the opportunity's there. He knew Ben Roethlisberger was retiring, but there were still other jobs around the league that he maybe could have settled into. Did he just want to play for Mike Tomlin? Could he have gone back to the Buffalo Bills for that same kind of money and just been a backup? No, he probably wants to start. He wants to compete
or go to the Bills to win a Super Bowl. Like they're going to be in contention to win a Super Bowl, and even as a backup quarterback, that's appealing. But you're right. No, he didn't. He came here.
Yeah. So, but he's still going to have to battle, and there's no way and this is the other thing with Omar Khan being named the GM. So you have Kevin Colbert, on his way out, doesn't leave them without a quarterback. But Omar Khan's still in these discussions, still in these meetings. He's internal, he's there. But it doesn't necessarily mean that Kenny Pickett won't be on any shorter of leash. We've seen when GMs and head coaches, and those are all in flux in the previous regimes, guys there, all of a sudden it's like that's not the guy anymore. And I struggle because the reason we're having this conversation and trying to get to my long-winded point is that there isn't anyone that's the horse to back in this race. You don't have who's the horse, Rich whatever that ended up winning. Rich Strike, was it Rich Strike or
Something
Strike
like
Rich?
that.
I might have
see,
it backwards.
We even don't remember it because that's how improbable it was.
yeah. I believe it or not, the jockey competed a lot in Youngstown, Ohio, at the Mahoning Valley Casino there, the Casino and Raceway, the Hollywood Casino. How about that? That's just crazy. But yeah, insurmountable odds. Preakness coming around the corner, folks, if you didn't already. But it's on my brain. But, now people are going to put their money behind this because they saw something that might not still be a sure thing there. But none of these guys, if you're comparing to horse racing, I don't think any of them are head and shoulders above. You're not going to sell me that Mitchell Trubisky, if he's just what he was with Chicago, yeah, okay, Pony. He could be competent. But if you look at Ben's statistics, all he had to do was be competent. You look at Josh Allen when he was first starting the league and just being competent, and they have to build on each season. Kenny will struggle. Kenny will struggle when he first starts. Mason Rudolph has struggled, but has he really struggled that much? And Trubisky's been up and down. Any of these guys could really take this, and it's a matter of what they show. They got a short window. You're going to have practice. You're going to have, this is why it bothers me too. You have like mini camps and somebody's like, oh, Trubisky threw this nice long pass to so-and-so and Pat Freeman or somebody, I think. And then Kenny Pickett threw this. Yeah. And the Guardian helmets that look like space balls. So, and then Mason throws an interception. I'm like, who's reporting this? Do they only throw one pass a piece? Like, come on now. You're just dumping on the guy for the sake of dumping on the guy to try to make your point. And I can't wait to get to camp and see how this is divvied up. And I guarantee you Mason's going to get some first-team reps, and there's going to be people. We're going to see if Kenny gets any first-team reps at all.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, he's not playing this year, man. And we could only make that determination when we actually get in there. If he goes and plays in some preseason games, lights it up. But what happens when he throws that first interception or that second interception or fumbles the football or Trubisky does something? It's like a lot of these things are still going to be non-factors in the grand scheme of things. That the receiver that he's throwing to run the right route. Did an offensive lineman miss a block? And, these things are going to happen in the regular season too, but you make a lot of good points when you were talking about that surrounding cast back in 2019. And it's not Pat Freiermuth, and it's not Najee Harris, and maybe it's a better offensive line, and they're rebuilding an offensive line right now. But the wide receivers, Deontay Johnson as a rookie versus now they have Chase Claypool. It isn't like Juju, a banged up Juju that wasn't always available, or Johnny Holton, Tevin Jones, Deion Kane, who came off of the Colts practice squad. I mentioned these, Dante Moncrief, a veteran who didn't pan out at all. There's a lot more here, and Najee and Pat are going to help whoever the quarterback ends up being. I know it seems like we're all over the place with this show, and it wasn't necessarily just to be like a defensive Mason Rudolph show, which I've done plenty of. And, it gets the ratings, it gets the clicks and the views and whatnot. But it's not just that, because we're both still in agreement. Why would Mitchell Trubisky, even Pony saying it, be the week one starter? Why are we thinking that? Well, why is he getting the starting team or first team reps in OTAs and minicamp? Because he's the veteran who has the most experience of any of the quarterbacks available. And that should put him at the top of the pecking order. Not to mention he was the top quarterback overall and second overall pick in his draft. He's got some pedigree there to say, this is the guy we're going to try out first before Mason Rudolph, who's this guy. And then you go down the line. Kenny Pickett, I think, has some tough sledding to ascend the ladder over not just one, but both of these guys with just a couple of months to do it.
Yeah, it's what you said earlier before. And it's just we don't know what we don't know. And I think this podcast, the point of it was to try and level the playing field of each of the three quarterbacks and try and get away from like Mitchell is by far and away going to be that starting quarterback, or something like Mason is by far and away that third string quarterback and never going to see the field, or like Kenny Pickett's going to rise to the. We're trying to level the playing field. We don't know about Mitchell Trubisky. We don't know if if his time in Chicago was all situational. We don't know if a new situation, if the grass is greener, it could be. We could do really, really well in the Steelers and have that different situation. The grass is greener, but that could have just been him. What we saw in Chicago, that could be him. He's just mediocre at best for his career. We don't know either situation at this point in time. And like getting in midsummer right before the football season, we don't know about Mason yet. We've seen some okay, we've seen some good, we've seen some bad. But our point when talking about Mason today is we haven't seen enough to make a definitive statement with he is either going to be a third string quarterback, or he should be out of the league, or he's going to be by far and away the starter or the franchise quarterback. We just don't know yet. And then, of course, with Kenny Pickett, I think fewer people will argue this, but we just don't know that he's going to be the guy that's going to actually be able to replace Ben Roethlisberger long term. We don't know if he's going to even make it in the league or not. You can't overlook the fact that 19 other teams passed up on him, and it still took a while for him to get drafted as even the first quarterback. There are just a lot of I don't know, and that's the point of this podcast, is to level that playing field. Put all three quarterbacks next to each other, and it's going to be crazy. And I think the point that I'll at least want to stress before we close out here is that we also have to hold back and wait a second whenever the season starts, is support that first week one quarterback. And when they throw that first interception, don't go to that next person on the depth chart, or even that third person on the depth chart, and say this guy needs to come in and replace, because you do need some time to develop things. Like we saw Mason be up and down in that 2019 season because he was in and out. He was in and out with being injured or getting benched, and he didn't necessarily get a flow or rhythm, and it affects things. So we just got to see. It's like I said, it's a podcast to try and level the playing field, try and look at each quarterback maybe a little more equally, and not necessarily put one over the other when it's all said and done, at least over the summer before we get to see more out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even level the playing field. I think if we're talking just you and I, and, to some extent, we could probably get everyone else on board here as well, including Brian or whatever. Brian has even gone as far to say that the quarterback of the future right now isn't on the roster right now. And I would disagree with that necessarily either.
Can't really argue with all of it, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah. So you have, let's say in this aspect too, let's take that, because I've already been mentioning about Trubisky's contract. He's not getting cut this year. If they cut Mason Rudolph, they're not saving a whole lot of simoleons. It's only $3 million. It's $3 million to have somebody as backup, because are you going to force and have Kenny as a backup? Let's say Trubisky gets hurt at halftime of the second game of the season, and all of a sudden you've got Pickett through the whole year. How confident are the Steelers in their offensive line that you don't get Pickett rocked 50 times in now 17 games because you didn't fix certain aspects of the offensive line? I'm not certainly convinced of Kendrick Green or Mason Cole at center just yet. We hear some good things about Kevin Dotson. Is he going to be the left guard, or is it going to be Green? You got to hope James Daniels is better than what you had with Trey Turner. Now, I think if you put Daniels next to Okorafor, then that helps. And you got Dan Moore Jr., should be better in year 2. But if he plays like he did in year 1, that's going to be a problem for whoever the quarterback is. And maybe that's why you have Trubisky out there and he gets the run around, and then he just turns the ball over instead of Mason standing there like a statue and turning the ball over. Or you put Kenny Pickett out there and he becomes the next Tim Couch or the next David Carr. And that's why I don't want to see happen. And that's part of the level, the playing field thing. But when you also talk about some other things here, and we're talking about 39-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. Let's bring this on the screen too as best we can. Of course, we got to have ads off the wazoo when it comes to certain stats, but 18 to 32. I mean, this is 56 completion percentage, 188 yards, 1 touchdown. He didn't have any multiple touchdown games until you get to that game where they actually won against the Denver Broncos. This team was already 1-3 at this point. Surprised everyone and beat the Buffalo Bills. The Broncos were already, I think, 3-1 at this point, but just 15 to 25. And the games you asked Ben to throw a lot more, 40, 58, and 40, those were all losses to the Raiders, Bengals, and Green Bay Packers for one reason or another. You also had injuries to people like TJ Watt, for example, who you got to have on the field. Or you have the Seahawks game, which was close, and if we remember, had a nice a nice little fiasco with the officiating at the end of that game. The bobbled pass by DK Metcalf, and then they decided to replay whatever and put 3 seconds on the clock and allowed the field goal and everything at the end. Boy, it wasn't that fun. But you look at some more of Ben's stats here: 29 of 40. Okay, just the one touchdown there. He wasn't necessarily, he threw some picks here or there, and then didn't. But it wasn't like the biggest statistical year for Ben. You know what I mean? He has 22 of 34 for 266. Ben just had like the 300. He got a little bit closer there, but he threw 58 attempts against the Bengals in that 24-10 loss in week 3, 318 yards. Didn't have a whole lot of 300-yard games until they got to that Vikings game where they were getting smoked, and they nearly came back and won. But that was that Thursday night game, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. That game was absolutely miserable through the beginning part of it. You had the Tennessee Titans game. He threw 25 attempts, 148 yards, no touchdown, no interception, and then 1-1 apiece over the last 3 games. A loss to the Chiefs, a win over the Browns in his finale. Only 123 yards and 52% completed in the Ben farewell game, and then against the Ravens. 244 touchdown and interception, a little bit better, 68% completed percentage, but 605 pass attempts, 3,740 yards, 22 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And they barely make the playoffs. So I think that's where some of this is coming from is, can Mitchell Trubisky, can Mason Rudolph, can Kenny Pickett, can they do at least that? Or can they do better? Or what happens if they come out there and they're about the even Steven that we've been talking about? You throw for about 1,000 fewer yards, and they throw for 18 to 20 touchdowns and maybe a dozen interceptions. This could, my whole point in this whole being here is, could one of these quarterbacks carry this team into the postseason? I think everybody just thinks, oh, well, they're dog crap. I take a look at the defensive side of the ball and just say, if they could do more than a ton of 3-and-outs, if they could run the ball with Najee Harris, which is what you were already saying, those James Conner statistics, the run game was dead last or next to last. Where were the Giants?
I think that was the year it was dead last. It was, at least last year, dead last, you're right.
Yeah, the Giants were close, I think, without Saquon Barkley the one year, and they've been close. They've had offensive line problems for a very long time. This wasn't just singularly a quarterback problem in 2019 or even 2020. They win 11 games in a row. Like, you know what I mean? 12-win team. Where does that come from with the same roster? Because they're healthy. That's what ended up happening with the Bengals. And then all of a sudden they weren't healthy. You lose Bud Dupree, you lose Devin Bush. And then you look last year. And I don't know, was Ben healthy? Did they try and like squeeze a little too much left out of him? Are you going to bench this guy that's the all-time great? Everybody was looking for that. Like I said, the Aaron Rodgers, the Brett Favre thing. I'm not trying to say that Mason Rudolph is Aaron Rodgers. I might say, though, they could get a steal like that with Kenny Pickett because it's the unknown. You don't know. It took Aaron Rodgers how many seasons to get on the field? 3 or 4 years. And he went out there, and it wasn't his sharpest when he first started, but he was more prepared. And all of a sudden, he's an MVP right after that, one more year, because they still had like a losing record in Green Bay. And I know they're looking across, they're looking at Favre. What's Favre doing with the Vikings and this and that? Should we have kicked this guy out of here? All those questions end up popping up. And those are all the things we're going to be talking about here going into the future. It's just kind of like, I think the way I'm looking at this is that I'm like, hey, raise your thought process here on Mason. Bring it up, okay? We're right here. This is our floor. Bring it up because his floor isn't as low as what some of you out there are thinking. And Mitch Trubisky, his ceiling isn't as high as what some of you are thinking. And the same thing with Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's maybe the unknown, but we start him right here. These guys are all on this level playing field. And that's why we're having this fun, I guess, discussion about quarterback competition coming up. It's far from over. We don't know what's going to happen. God forbid one of the guys gets hurt. But I think when you get to training camp, I think this is the thing you're going to end up seeing is Mason probably gets the QB2 reps. He's probably behind Trubisky to start. He may get some QB1 starts. These guys, I think, all play in the preseason. There's only 3 preseason games now. So you're going to get all of them. The guy that's going to suffer the most out of here is the one you think is going to get a spot on this team as QB3, and it's going to be, oh, well, you saved $3 million, and you're going to have him as QB3. Chris Oladokun is not going to get anything more than QB4 snaps. It's not going to happen. He may not even get to play in the preseason. That's the actual reality of this, is because we have 3 guys that are all on the same level playing field that you're going to have to try and see what they've got. And I think when it boils down to it, I think Trubisky and Rudolph get the first 2 shots. Now, if they don't give Rudolph a chance and they give it to Kenny Pickett, I'm going to eat my words here. And I'm not going to backpedal on it. I'm bringing it up right now. I'm going to say, well, this shows us a little bit something different than what the Steelers are thinking internally. And they really don't think much of this guy. And now it's going to be Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. But in my heart, in my brain too, I should say both, I'm not really emotionally attached. If Mason Rudolph gets released, yeah, so what? You know what I mean? I'm not emotionally attached to these opinions. But I think Trubisky gets like the initial starts and the initial snaps. You don't have Ben Roethlisberger taking days off now in training camp that gives a Mason Rudolph, a Josh Dobbs, or even a Duck Hodges those additional reps that those guys have benefited from in order to get those spots and win those roster spots that they were able to in the past. So Oladokun, if anything, Trubisky and Rudolph, they're not going to want to leave the field. They've got a first-round rookie draft pick breathing down their neck every single day at training camp. They cannot afford to miss time. This will turn into the New England Patriots with Cam Newton last year and his whole vaccination status and having to sit out cost him his job to Mac Jones. It literally did, because Mac Jones got to log a significant amount of time, and they said, well, why are we even bothering with this? I'm kind of surprised they just outright cut him, but they still had, Hoyer, and they were trying to do something with Stidham out there too. I don't know what that was all about, but I think that's more of a wild pipe dream like Jason Stidham than thinking that Mason Rudolph could potentially log these amount of snaps and have a shot and have a chance. I think some people are going to be surprised.
Yeah, I don't know. I think fewer people might share my same thought process, but also I just root for the best quarterback to do the best job. I don't care if it's Mason Rudolph, if it's Mitchell Trubisky, if it's Kenny Pickett. All of them are young enough that if they're going to be the franchise quarterback and they have what it takes to be that long-term success and give the Steelers shots at winning the Super Bowl every year, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Chris either. It's just whoever it is, start rooting for them and don't necessarily put others down, because then it creates more of a toxic environment too. And there's no need if Mason Rudolph gets on the field and just because you have preconceived notions that you start booing him or whatever the case is. Just root for your team, root for one of these quarterbacks to be the franchise leader over the next few years. Hopefully like a decade plus is of course the dream scenario, but yeah, just root for someone to be there, and hopefully you don't necessarily have too much riding on one or another.
Yeah, you know what? That's great that you bring that up too. And I think that's the main thing that gets under my skin with some of this. And I think a lot of our viewers and listeners out there are in agreement. You've got some people that they just pile on some of these players for no reason. Even former players. And sometimes, yeah, I'll make fun, like Antonio Brown. I call him Antonio, but he does it to himself a lot of times. I don't think Mason's ever done anything. Show me on the Mason Rudolph doll where he hurt you. Really, what did this guy ever do to you? And it's funny because you see some Bears fans who are just as equally hurt over Mitch Trubisky. And I will say that maybe he didn't get his fair shake. That's the one thing I have a benefit of the doubt. I was adamantly against, no, I don't want Marcus Mariota out there. That's a guy I didn't want. And Jameis Winston, I didn't feel good about it. So when you talk about the various free agents, I think the Steelers have put themselves in the best situation possible to try and get one of these guys to be a winner. Now, the interesting aspect I said is as you look to the future, you could have a 2023 where, okay, let's say you sit Kenny Pickett for a year and you find out that Mitch Trubisky isn't the guy. You find out Mason Rudolph isn't the guy. Mason, you don't have to re-sign. Trubisky, you don't even have to keep. You're going to roll with Kenny Pickett now. You're going to find somebody else to maybe be a backup, maybe another veteran, maybe bring one of those 2 back. But I'm just saying, I think looking ahead, and what if one of those guys ends up being the guy? You've got 5 years to find out, essentially, 4 and the first-year option on Kenny Pickett to really decide and really make that decision as to whether or not he might have the goods. So, Noah, thanks for joining me, man. You know what? We didn't go as gung-ho as I thought on the Mason train, but again, we're trying to be as realistic as possible and explore this from every angle. And I'm not even sure that we necessarily did. We're we're scattered all over on this because there's just so many different ways that this could shake out. Because you know what? It's June. And they got Guardian helmets and shorts, and we don't know how this thing's going to play out. But thanks, Ben, for joining us once again and taking some time out of your schedule to speak to Steelers Nation out there.
Oh, yeah. It was fun to get back on. I think our scatteredness kind of is parallel to the actual situation. There is a little bit of scatteredness going on in the quarterback room, which is bound to happen when you lose a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famer quarterback.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing that's scary, 18 years of Ben Roethlisberger. But you know what? He won initially, and he played like some backyard football and put up some pretty, not the greatest statistics, but he won. But look at that defense. All time, like 2008, like was an all time great. But they had those pieces from probably 05, 06-ish all the way through. Yep. He also had Jerome Bettis. He had Hines Ward. He has some guys that were franchise greats, James Harrison and or Hall of Famers, Alan Faneca for a spell. We don't know if those type of players are, well, we already knew in some context of what those players were before. And now you've got like TJ Watt and you got Minka, and, you know, you could make some arguments that maybe history could repeat itself maybe with one of these quarterbacks. But if the quarterbacks, if they play poorly, you got to give him some time. There's got to be some patience. I think the Steelers can afford that as an organization. So can Mike Tomlin. It's not the dumpster fire situations and knee-jerk shotgun reactions you get from everywhere else. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you to all everyone that's on YouTube that's already done so. We appreciate you. Over 5,000 now. That's cool to see. And it's great and humbling to see all the numbers up. Until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Noah. We encourage everyone out there, as always, to be good or be safe. Be good. And we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.